Okay, good evening, everyone. We were really lucky to get John. He's quite a remarkable person. His life is very interesting. He's a native Californian who loves everything about California. He has witnessed massive changes over the decades, but he's learned to adapt. He's a very visual artist, so he sees beauty everywhere. In fact, we were just talking about brown hills, and he sees beauty in those, even though they're green right now. He's been drawing ever since he was a little kid, and he majored in art and graphic design in college, and he worked in the printing industry for over 40 years. And then about 15 years ago, he picked up his brushes again and began a second career as an oil painter. And now he's enjoying his third phase as an art instructor. He teaches a course in basic drawing and another one in the principles of design at in Antioch at the Lynn House Gallery. And if you're interested in that, any of that, John's information, lots of information and some beautiful artwork are on display on his website.
Thank you for asking me to judge the show. It was a real honor. Kind of took me by surprise, and I really enjoyed doing it. Pleasanton is, like the name, is a very pleasant place. And before and after I went to the museum on Main, I enjoyed just walking around and taking pictures of the vintage signs and you know, the things that still remain of that small town feeling that Pleasanton has, you know, in the core part of it. So, and enjoyed meeting Ken and Christine, and now I can see what they really look like, because, you know, we all had masks on. So,
Huh.
but I kind of roamed through the exhibit. I must have been there an hour and a half or 2 hours, because I really wanted to keep looking and looking at these paintings, and naturally something grabs you right off. But then after a while you go back and you go, wow, I didn't notice that one either. And, you know, and it's not easy. It was a very, I tried to be as fair as possible. And, you know, ultimately judging is subjective. But what I tried to do was, you know, the way I paint is pretty much like a loose realism. And I'm big on drawing and design. So I deliberately decided that I want to recognize other forms of expression, including sculptures and watercolors and you name it, abstract art, which I don't do, but I do appreciate it. And I didn't want to be that kind of judge that only looks for things like what they do. And I want to be as inclusive as possible. And so I hope that you'll see that in what I've selected. There were other pieces that didn't quite make it, but that's not to say they weren't excellent pieces. You know, when you just have so many choices, you have to kind of make a cutoff and hone it down at some point. So I'm wondering if we could start with the honorable mentions and then finish up with the merit. Is okay. This one, Nature's Balance. I'm just so impressed with this whole type of art. It's very graphic. It's very symbolic. It's nothing like what I do. And that's what I like so much about it. I go, wow, there really are, there's all kinds of expression out there, and I love it. I mean, there's so much to look at here. There's so much going on. And I do think there's some kind of a narrative, although I'm not sure what it is, but you know, there's some kind of a story. It's, you know, it's in some ways it's innocent, but it's also very sophisticated. And again, I love the textures and like, look at the patterns in the animals and the trees. It's almost like it could be a quilt or something. So I was just so impressed with it. This one is, I happen to know Nancy. She's a good friend. Her paintings, we paint together a lot, and we can look at the same scene and get two completely different results. And she always blows my mind, like, how did you see that? You know, and this one is particularly nice because of there's some realism there, but there's so much abstraction, and she's really good at blending the two. She throws in elements that I don't know where they come from, but it's beautiful. This one really impressed me. This artist did a couple of these, and I had a hard time choosing between the two. My first feeling is like, oh my gosh, this is like jewelry. I could see this in a showcase with like, you know, precious stones all over it or something, like, you know, rings and bracelets, and it just has that richness. I wouldn't even begin to know how to, I guess it's acrylic, but it has metal in it or something. It's resin, and it must have some sort of metal in it. It's just beautiful. And again, it's so far from what I would do. And that just impresses the heck out of me. This is a very beautiful landscape. The composition is excellent. One of the things I teach my students is, you know, how to create the illusion of 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional surface. And this one really does that. As the things in the background, as you retreat into the distance, what actually happens is there are particles of dust and such in the air, and they tend to block light. And so as you get farther into the distance, you'll see the values become more regular and flatten out. And in the foreground, you have stronger darks and lights. And anybody who is studying painting will learn that's kind of a basic starting point for composition and design, and being able to show atmospheric perspective. And this does a really good job of that. This one really touched my heart. What is so interesting about this is there's a whole story here. You don't need to see the kite, is what's very cool about this. Not only that, it's very well rendered, but you just don't, I mean, you would think with a title like that, there'd be a kite in it. And it's just so great because you don't have to show the viewer a kite to get it. And of course, like I said, the rendering's really good. The dog and the little girl are charming, and the composition is very interesting because the kite string just leads you off the page, or maybe it's leading you into the page, hard to tell, but and then the character is looking up. So it's something you would come back to again and again and go, that is so interesting, because you want to know, you want to be her, you want to be looking at that kite. So it's a very good dynamic composition. There were 3 like this of the tulips, and I had a really hard time. But I think what finally got me with this one was just this sense of movement, and they're all going in the same direction. One of my wife's favorite things used to be when I would bring tulips home from Trader Joe's, and they start off kind of quiet, but as they sit in the vase over a couple of days, they start doing this strange dance, kind of a rangy thing. And this reminded me of that. Pretty soon they're like going all which way. And that's kind of what these tulips are doing in this one. And they're about midway through their dance. And I just thought, this is like a dance. This is a really beautiful rendering. I do a lot of figurative work myself. I work with models all the time. And I can appreciate how much experience it takes to get to this level of showing the human figure and having it look realistic and yet not like a photograph. And then the bonus would be the textures. Drawing fabric and drapery and drawing the texture of the hair is something you really have to work on. It takes time and experience, and this this painting really shows it. And it's also has somewhat of a narrative in it. That figure isn't just smiling. The figure is kind of looking for something, and I get that. I mentioned before that I'm not an abstract artist, but I really appreciate it. I'm not sure I would even know how to do abstract art, other than sometimes my paintings start out like abstracts and I give up and they kind of end up looking that way, but it's without intention. This one really is interesting because what I really appreciate with abstract art is when you have a layered effect. This one achieves that in two ways. First of all, to me, on the front plane, you have this texture of pink and blue and purple and sort of a gold, and then you have it against black, and that just pulls it forward in the picture plane. And then conversely, up at the top, you have these things stepping away into the distance. And I just feel like that painting is three-dimensional. This one I particularly like because, you know, I'm not positive where it was taken, the picture, but it just, I mean, I've been to Spain or the Mediterranean area. I just love that architecture so much that I don't know even if this is true that that's where it was, but it just reminded me of that so much. And it captures the essence of that. I'm not sure if you'd call it Moorish or what, but it reminded me of my trips over to Spain and the Mediterranean area. Now for the merit. This one, again, the cool thing about abstract art, and I consider this abstract, it doesn't really tell you anything, and it leaves the viewer wide open to make up stories or impressions. And I guarantee everybody that looks at this painting is going to see a different thing going on. Some people might see a figure walking with a mountain in the background. On the other hand, somebody might see a flower over on the left. But again, I'm going to repeat myself and say, I see layers of depth in there. I see different picture planes receding into the distance. And there's a lot of movement. That's almost like a circular composition. It keeps your eye moving, and it doesn't explain itself. It lets you figure it out. And of course, this one just grabbed me because it's very, very clearly got a narrative. I think I could feel like these figures are feeling. They have to go somewhere, and they already miss their families. I think we're all getting that. This is somewhat abstract, but it's certainly abstract realism. It's not overworked, which is great. Watercolor is a challenging medium, and to get just enough on there and leave your white spaces it takes a lot of skill to do that. It's an excellent painting. It's well crafted, but then the icing on the cake is it's got such a narrative going on. I mean, you just know the story here, and it just grabs you emotionally. And this one, if I titled it, I would use another word. Not that this is wrong, but I love the word murmuration, which is I guess it's a term that ornithologists use for this inexplicable thing that birds do in flocks. And I don't know how they do it, but if you've ever seen it, it's amazing. There'll be thousands of birds, and they're all going left, right, up, down, circles. It's like they're water swirling down a drain or something. I don't know how they do it. What kind of overarching intelligence is guiding the whole flock? And this painting, which isn't a real large painting, but it certainly achieves that. And the background is very, very good too. I mean, it could work just as well on a plain background, but the background, again, we're seeing a soft background and a more crisp foreground with the birds. And the fact the birds aren't all the same size is also good. I'm very pleased with how this one came out. And I think this is the last one. Again, to me, this is very sophisticated. I can see really good drawing skills in this one. It kind of, I don't know how the artist would react to my comment, but it kind of reminds me of those early 20th century abstract expressionist painters. Not exactly Picasso, but kind of that era. And again, you're not explaining anything to the viewer, you're letting them decide. And when you give people that much freedom, they're going to see all kinds of things in it. It kind of blows your mind, and it never ceases to, keep your imagination going. To me, a good painting is something you want to come back and see again and again, and this certainly does it.